Hello, and welcome back to the Irish Tennis Updates podcast. My name is Adam, and I'm your host. Today, I'm chatting to Tristan Farron Mahon. This is part two of our chat. I'd recommend that if you haven't yet listened to part one, that you do that before you come back here and listen to part two. This week, Tristan talks about his experiences with Davis Cup, his thesis on tennis, the changes that still need to be made to the professional tennis structure, Tristan's current job and how tennis has helped him in that role, and more. I think this is another really fascinating episode. I think there's a lot to take from it once again. So I hope you enjoy, and here we go. Here's Tristan. I just wanted to go on a little bit to look at your Davis Cup, your ties playing Davis Cup a little bit. So how old were you for that first time you got the call up?
Yeah, I was. So I would have been 18. So I was 18 when I got the call up. I'd actually played off the year before. We had a playoffs for the fifth man spot in Ukraine, and I'd lost in the final that to Darren McLaughlin, who was
Okay.
I think I'm 17 at the time, 7-5 in the third. But it was he deserved it, so much at the time. He was a great player, a really enjoyable experience. And I remember then getting the call up in 2005 and just being delighted to have that. I had that option. I'd been offered actually to play for Switzerland at the time, but the coach there had obviously a pretty good eye, because he said well, we like it, because my mother was Swiss, her father was Swiss anyway. I grew up in Ireland, but she had a Swiss passport. We all had that dual nationality, and I trained with them a little bit for a couple of months. Just at the end of 2005, one of my doubles partners was a Swiss guy called Alex Sadecki, and we had a lot of success in the juniors, winning a number of kind of grade ones, and they offered me this opportunity to play for Swiss, but they said, we'll fund you for 2 years, we'll give you wild cards and support you, on the tour, but you're only allowed to play doubles. So they kind of knew, I think, at that point. Which is unfortunate, but I chose not to, and then I got a call up almost immediately after that to play Davis Cup for Ireland, which partly could have been driven by the fact that I could have played for Switzerland, because there was obviously other deserving players at the time as well, and I played that tie in Finland under Owen Casey. I've been part of the team actually previously as well, so the year previously as a sub with in Dublin, but obviously being part of the 4-man squad rather than the kind of the 5 and 6-man squads, it was very different. Travelled out to Finland with the Sorensen brothers and David O'Connell, and Owen Casey obviously captained that. Unfortunately, my rackets, my bag got lost on the way out, so I had no rackets to train with for the couple of days beforehand, and I played with these Babolat's lent to me by Luke Sorensen, and got my rackets the day before the day of the singles matches, which was obviously were quite tough, but we were tied at 1-1 because so Luke. Sorry, we've got it wrong here. No, I think won the dead rubber, but I think we were 2-0 down, but they've been quite tight. And I got the call up the night before. In case he came and knocked on the door and said that okay, you're in for doubles tomorrow. Are you ready? And absolutely delighted. Something I think you dream of as a kid, any kind of kid growing up, and especially in Ireland. I think Davis Cup's always been a big thing. It's always been a real honour to kind of play for Ireland and represent your country. And then to obviously get that the call up to play the fixture, and that was against Jarkko Nieminen, who was I think 11 or 12 in the world at the time in singles, and a guy called Thomas Katola, who was a top 30 or 40 doubles player at the time. So it was always going to be a tough fixture, but obviously excited. And it was myself and Kevin Sorensen, and I'll be honest, I let the pressure get to me a little bit. Yeah. When we stepped out on court, I don't know if I think if I was in Dublin, people might remember because of how horrific some of it went. But I found myself in a position where I really struggled serving wise. It's something that had been an integral part of my game. My first serve and my second serve at the time, and I really struggled with it. I was kind of throwing in 2 or 3 double faults a game, and it just made it against those guys, they were lapping it up. So we were always it put pressure on Kevin to hold his serve, put pressure on us return games, and we played well otherwise. I thought But I think we're very lucky to even, I think it was 1-3 and 2 it wasn't close by any means. But I think on the basis of how difficult a doubles match against guys of that caliber can be without with one partner who's struggling on serve. I think otherwise we played well. We made it battle out of it, in the points. But we were never given the chance, with things going that way. So it was something that actually stuck with me a little bit because played in front of quite a bit of audience, first Davis Cup fixture, and something that had never gone wrong for me previously, which my serve had gone wrong and shook me up for the year. To be honest, I had to do a lot of work on that to get that back mentally. But I had, after that, I had about a year and a half where it was quite challenging. But when I was starting to get results again in 2008, 2009, I did get a couple of call-ups. I think 2 or 3 call-ups. So one of them being the Ukraine tie and others. But I was to be honest, I was quite disappointed with Tennis Ireland at the time. I'd obviously had that difficult transition with my national ranking. I had my funding cut after I was injured for 6 months. So Des Allen was the CEO at the time. Refused to put me forward for the development grant funding, and obviously funding myself most of the time. At that point, my parents were kind of only funding my coaching, and I was responsible for funding tournament travel. And I turned around and I said no. So I said no on the basis that I felt I was standing up for something, that I wasn't going to play, under that kind of system and setup. And it wasn't that I wasn't a necessity by any means, because we had such a strong group of players at the time. I was coming in at kind of either doubles or fourth man, and so it was easy for them to kind of look over. But they did keep asking a number of times, and then in 2009, I think when I finally kind of got over it and I saw things changing, and obviously Gary Cal was doing a great job, and we had such a great group of players, I really wanted to be part of it. Obviously had the injury and didn't get a chance to play again. So I obviously really disappointed that I only ever got the one playing cap. I think it was probably 3 teams, but because it is an area that I've something that I always felt that I worked very hard for, and if I'd known my career was only going to be 3 years, I probably I might have taken a different approach, perhaps a more mature approach, and just focus on what was right for me at the time. And I think playing Davis Cup would have been right for me, because that's what you train for, that's what you work for. Playing those fixtures, playing in that team environment with a great group of guys, and great coaches leading you. It's what gives you motivation. It gives you motivation on the difficult days to train harder, to work harder. So it is definitely something that I'm very disappointed about. But I enjoyed for many years. Even when I didn't play, even when I said no, I went and watched the fixtures. Yes. So, which is a funny, it shows how I was kind of contradicting myself, because I knew what I wanted, but I felt I was standing up for something. But looking back, I would have loved to play a few more matches, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's unfortunate. Okay, I guess disappointing. What you're saying about the situation it was that you had to make the stand that you did. That you were in that position, I guess, was unfortunate in the first place, and then that you didn't get the chances to play when you could have, I guess, is unfortunate for you to look back on, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's I get it's part of the the ups and downs. I think of a tennis career. I never dreamed for 1 minute that my tennis career was only going to be kind of 3 years.
Yes.
I always I had this belief, especially as I was transitioning into doubles. I had this belief that I was to put it kind of bluntly, I was sure that I could break top 100 doubles. I was sure that I could do really well, and I was sure that I'd have 10 years of Davis Cup to play in the future.
Yes, yeah.
And you make those decisions at the time, and on that basis. And I wasn't really in a position to make a fuss out of it, so I just quietly said no. And I gave them the reasons so that so they were aware of them. But if you look back, and I think it's important to think long term and do what's right for you. As well to kind of get there, and I knew at the time, even when I was saying I knew that Davis Cup was an important part of what I wanted to do with tennis. So so it is definitely disappointing. But it's great to see the success that all the guys had, and just how strong group of players we had. It was at that time it's just it was phenomenal. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to move on a little bit and talk about the thesis you did. So in 2013, I know you did this thesis and you were looking at tennis. So do you mind just going into and tell me a bit about what you found in this thesis and what you then went on to do with it?
Yeah. So obviously, after my injury, I did actually try to come back for about a year after, but I ended up breaking my ankle actually 4 times in a row. So I spent a year mostly on crutches, and my dad passed away at the time, and in 2011, and obviously family became the priority there with my siblings, and it's something that I perhaps neglected. Folks in my career hadn't been around. My younger brother was only kind of 18, 19 at the time. So I made the decision to stay close to home, and I obviously coached for a couple of years, and then went to university in Loughborough, which is close by, gave me the opportunity to come back regularly, and be close to the family, which I really appreciated. And I did on the basis that I always thought I was going to follow a coaching career, and then having that management aspect would be just another notch to help kind of progress and understand more about how you can support players in kind of a wider context. But I found myself kind of led by some of my experiences with sports administration in Ireland, and seeing some of the great examples elsewhere, what was kind of taking place in other countries, obviously within the kind of tennis development system. And I decided to kind of draw on some of those personal experiences, looking at players that I knew, and who had done so well, were great players and had potential to be top players, but never had the funding or the support system around them to kind of get there. And I always felt that was quite unfair. I was very fortunate when I was younger, and then I found, when I went on tour, I kind of funded myself most of the time through league and matches, but I always had a backup. My family was incredibly supportive. If I ever needed it, the backup was there. But it still restricted the number of tournaments I could play until I kind of got that success. But that wasn't, I had friends that came from positions that were, very challenging, but they had the potential, they had the possibility, and there's so many examples, but they didn't have the opportunity to make it. They didn't have the structure around them, whether it was because they were from a country like Ireland or another country, or whether it was because that the system was just wouldn't allow them to spend 6 years trying to make it. They didn't have that the funding behind them to be able to last it out, and that was the reality at the time. The reality was you break top 100 at 26, 27 unless you're one of the elite guys. Average age was 26 years of age plus to break top 100 for the first time, and we had a setup with the ITF whereby futures events, prize money futures events, hadn't been changed since 1991, 92, when they first kind of came about in the satellite tour, and prize money had remained throughout the same, whereas it had gone up, I think it was 8,500% on the ATP tour, and even more at the top end of the ATP tour. So you had you hear these guys in Djokovic looking to form a breakup tour now because he feels that there's not enough prize money getting through to the top guys, which is reality as well, in a way compared to other sports, but they're already getting 99% of that kind of pot, and it's quite unusual in kind of the sporting sphere to have such an unequal distribution of prize money. And you had some kind of leading voices on tour. I'm not a controversial, but I'm not a huge fan of some of the changes the Federer put into place while he was the representative, the player representative and leader of the ATP board from the player's perspective, and that just resulted in greater inequality in prize money and in points distribution. So it made it harder for guys to break through into the top 100. So I decided to do a little bit of work around this as part of my thesis, and collect the views of current and past players who had, basically they weren't allowed to have broken into the top 100 in the career, although a couple of guys did who had broken top 100 did actually complete it. But it was kind of on the basis that looking at the structure, could the structure be improved? What needed to take place to improve the structure? Prize money being only one aspect of that. And I got a really good response. Kind of 200 players, 200 plus. I think about 180 were usable responses. Who kind of fed into that and ended up coming up with findings that made some really kind of reasonable suggestions on how things could change, and kind of highlighted the inequality and disparity and the challenges that it put on players, and the challenges that it would put on the ATP Tour and professional tennis in the long run. And while I was obviously very not young but inexperienced at the time in doing this, I think a lot of it was still quite valid. The great thing about it was that the ITF then did, off the back of this, I had some conversations with the research team in Spain, and with the Dave Miley, who was obviously chaired, head of development at the time, and about 6 months after my findings were published, they actually looked into it and used my survey guide and my research guide as kind of the baseline. So kind of asked those same questions back to the players, but through their own research processes. So they looked at that, and they explored the same kind of concepts, same concerns, and then they found some areas were quite different. The break-even point was, I think, it's about 130, 140 in the world. They found it to be close to 350, but that was because they excluded coaching, traveling, training, and living costs, which is probably 70% of your costs. But it led them to actually change, obviously, the prize money on the Futures Tour, and they increased that a couple of years after that. So I was delighted that it had that long-term impact, and hopefully they made a number of promises that were quite linked, which around kind of the regional tours and better kind of development opportunities and distribution of the points lower down. They haven't followed through. Obviously, the way that the current structure is set up is extremely challenging for players who are out there. If you speak to any of them, I imagine they must they must be finding it almost demotivating in a way. So I think there's a huge amount of work to do in that area. There's so many good examples of how how things can structures can work on a national and international scale. But the ITF are quite set in their way at the moment, and there's been some I think it's slow progress. I think increasing prize money by $5,000-$10,000 a tournament is not going to suddenly improve the lives of players out there. It's not about improving lives as well, or making money for these guys who are trying to break into the top 200. It's about breaking even and giving themselves a chance, a fair chance of actually getting into the top 200 and upwards, because on the current setup, it is heavily skewed towards players who are able to fund themselves or have funding, and it forces players lower down. And I know McGee's talked about it as well, and all the players have in the past in Ireland. And it's something I did as well, which is you have to play French league, German league, Italian league, Swiss league. You have to make enough money to travel to tournaments. Restricts the number of times you can play. It restricts your ability to travel with a coach. It restricts your ability to stay in the right circumstances, eat the right foods, be healthy, stay on top of your training and habits, in the right way. And I think when you have they're the little things that make the difference in the long run. It's not to say that people can't break through facing adversity. They can, they do, and they continue, will continue to. But I think it's not that the resource isn't there, the opportunity isn't there to shift that structure and change it to provide a fairer and better kind of journey, kind of development journey. I guess is the best way to describe it through the rankings. So something I'd like to see continue to change in the long run.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that, and obviously that you got to work so directly with players and produce this this thesis and then go present to the ITF and kind of they then went on the back of that to make changes. And obviously, as you said, those changes haven't necessarily been put into place. But what do you think is the biggest one or two things that should be done at this stage to to keep improving that for those players in that kind of position?
Well, I think so. Obviously, they made changes to prize money, which is great. I think I do agree with restricting the number of players ranked. I don't think I think it dilutes professionalism. It's, when you have so many players ranked, and what we want to do is have, you want to have 750, 800 players ranked, and and they're able to support themselves as they play on tour through prize money and other opportunities. So diluting, bringing that number down, I think is great. I think in order to do that successfully, though, they need to set up, those national structures and support national federations to set up those national structures that allow the transition to take place without much cost to the player. So they initially talked about ranking points, so international ranking points through national events, and the ability to collect them, and regional-based kind of development tours, so with the ITF ranking points. And that seemed to me like a great idea, because it would allow guys who are in college tennis, would allow guys who are in, who are quality national players, who aren't maybe capable of taking the first step out and traveling out and competing, would allow them to be part of that, of that tour, and it could show you as a player whether or not you could, if you spent a couple of years playing that, there's that national tour, the regional tour within, let's say it's Ireland, the UK, you could figure out pretty quickly whether or not you can make it without much cost. So I think, if they focused on that side of it, I think that would be hugely beneficial, for players. I think a lot of players, may not like that, to be honest, because like the idea of traveling. But I think, that would be an option if you can collect enough points to be able to enter, international futures events, through a regional structure, a regional tour. I think you'd find, the best players would rise through that quickly and effectively, and you wouldn't, you would, at a much lower cost. So I think that would be a great change. I also think that they need to just widen the reach of the ATP Challenger Tour. They need to increase their obviously the prize money on that tour, and the reach of the tournaments, the number of tournaments that are taking place, if they want those, if they want to have, as they said, 350, 400, 500 guys making a living out of it. That Challenger Tour needs to be effectively marketed. It needs to be, similar to golf's, second tours or regional tours, whereby they are, events in themselves, and they are followed, by huge fan bases, and they have sponsors behind them, and they have the support of the wider tour. So I think, while it's great to say, you can increase prize money in the first round of Grand Slam and qualifying Grand Slam, it is great. It's a first step. It still only reaches the same number of players that are competing in those events. So I think, in order to support younger players, as they transition, on a very difficult journey, a kind of a regional tiered structure, moving into a wider challenger tour would be potentially quite effective. Obviously, it's not easy to implement, and I'm talking about it in this manner is a lot easier than implementing it practically. But I believe the resource is there, but the appetite isn't. It needs to support the top players. It needs to support obviously the ATP Tour, WTA Tour, and first and foremost ITF. And obviously national federations. So it's I think it's a challenge, but I think it's something that could be done if they would widen their thought process, and be more willing to engage players. I know they've got a player representative panel now. The ITF has brought that in previous, as I found in my research, that's been a name only, and has only existed of former players who were top 10 in the world. So not going to really be in a position to represent guys who are 500 in the world. So they've got that in place now, and in essence, it's almost like the ITF Tour is unionizing, but I think it's less so about that, and it's more about to make sure that there's good communication between players and the administration in order to implement changes in a practical manner that is realistic. So it's not about things aren't going to change overnight, but to make sure that conversation is allowed to take place. I think is the first step.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. All the points you make here, I think you're absolutely right that the changes need to be made and kind of what they are, and it's not easy, but I think they are the things that need to be done, and hopefully those are things we can see, over the coming, I guess, years, months, years. And now I'm conscious of your time, Tristan, but if it's okay, a couple more questions to ask. No, I just want to ask, what it is you're doing now, and how do you think that your kind of the background you have in tennis and in various areas of tennis, how do you think that that's kind of it helped or influenced kind of your role now today?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think so. At the moment, I'm working. So I manage kind of an insight and research consultancy arm as part of London Sport, who are one of the active partnerships over in the UK. So working under Sport England to kind of support them in implementing their policies and strategic priorities. Obviously, focusing specifically on London. So it's something, it's a role that I love at the moment, and I really enjoy what I'm doing. Having that opportunity to kind of see the impact of my work directly on grassroots sport, and see how the projects that I get to work on can really kind of provide people with opportunities to take part in sport across the capital over here. Sorry. So it's something I can see a kind of direct impact from. So I really enjoy that. I'm also looking to kind of take that next step, and I'm at the moment I'm embarking, so hoping to start an MBA shortly. But I think the kind of the key thing about tennis and my experience, obviously, professionally and growing up, even as a junior, I think the key thing is that I think tennis gives you that extra edge when it comes to kind of discipline and motivation and ability to kind of deal with adversity. I think I've always found that ex-athletes of any kind who've had that opportunity to be in those kind of professional training and competitive environments, when they translate that to an office environment, they are very, very driven. So they're able to take their experiences and into that office environment, and they take that discipline with them, that drive, that ambition. They're very good team players and are capable of kind of constantly challenging themselves and the organization to continue to improve in whatever field they're involved in. So it's something that a lot of employers look for, ex-athletes, and something I feel personally, but I see often as well with other colleagues as well, in terms of how they kind of approach situations. It's always very, very positive, always looking at from kind of a growth mindset perspective, looking to learn and develop and improve constantly. So I think there's a lot to be gained, even if you're involved in national competitive tennis, in Ireland or elsewhere. There's a lot to be gained from tennis that kind of is really beneficial for for your career and your personal life going forward.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So would you ever consider then going back into tennis in some capacity, in a coaching capacity maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to go back into tennis. It won't be coaching. I'd be very surprised if it was coaching. I absolutely, nothing else. I absolutely love coaching, and I obviously had a really good experience with that. And I always thought that's what I was going to do with my life. I just think that perhaps I have, I hope that I have a bit more to offer in terms of taking some of my practical experiences in tennis, and using them to kind of shape and positively influence kind of structural and administrative change. So whether that is around kind of competitive structures, surface setups, performance setups, kind of national, structured development pathways and educational kind of systems. I think it's less so about, I think perhaps, I've less to offer now in on-court experience and more to offer in providing the experts in those areas with opportunities to fulfill their roles, and give people more opportunities, obviously more participation opportunities, within the sport, but also more performance pathway opportunities and development opportunities. So I'd hope that I can be in a position in the future to positively influence change in that area.
Brilliant, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, and I wish you the best with whatever route you choose to go down. I think you have an awful lot to offer to whichever kind of route you decide to take. So just all the best with whichever it is, and I know you'll do some great things. But just a final question for you, Tristan. What's your favorite thing about tennis?
It has to be the battle. I think tennis is one of those sports. You're often very much on your own, especially obviously in singles and in doubles. You're obviously a close unit, but you're responsible for kind of what you do, and I think that feeling of being in locked in a battle for the length of time that you're on court, I think I think that's kind of always been my driver and motivator. I love the competitive aspect of it. I just love that feeling, the nerve, bit of nervousness beforehand, and then just giving it all, just being on court and giving it all, and trying to figure out a way to break down someone or a team. As you kind of progress through a match, and obviously there's a lot of ups and downs, within those periods, and just trying to stay calm through them and find a way through it. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to coming off court and just feeling good about about what you've done, and your effort and your attitude and just basically how hard you fought and how hard you tried. So there's nothing better than coming off after playing a match against someone, or where they've kind of got the same feeling, and you just win or lose, you just felt like you've just been in an epic battle. So I think for me it's definitely that competitive side. I love that.
Yeah. And now, Tristan, I think we'll leave it there. Really appreciate the time. I'll obviously get back to your day, but just a big thanks for taking the time to talk. And I think you have inspirational kind of story. You've been through a loss, but I think you've done some great stuff, and I know there's a lot more ahead of you. So big thanks and all the best.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and enjoy this a lot.
Thanks very much, Tristan.
Big thank you once again to Tristan Farron Mahon for his time and for sharing his really great insights and experiences in tennis. It's much appreciated by myself, and I'm sure by you as well. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast, and I'd encourage you, if you got this far, to subscribe to the show, to leave a review, to share this show with anybody you think might be interested. A big thank you in advance for that, and until next week, I've been Adam. Goodbye.